So the focus of this talk is, okay, you've written your Apache Apex applications, and you'd like to add visualizations. And if you look at a lot of, if you're thinking, one option is you can write the data externally somewhere, and then eventually it'll be visualized by some third-party system downstream, and that's fine. But you can tap into the real-time results immediately inside your Apex application. So it's pretty much getting real-time visualizations for your data. So that's what this talk will cover. It will give you a brief overview of what the visualizations look like that we've developed with DataTorrent RTS, and how to add them to your apps. And I'll have a quick mention as to how to do visualizations if you don't have RTS, but you just have Apache Apex. I'll talk about that briefly as well. So if we look at the whole stack again, the part that we're discussing is the one with the box around it, which is the real-time visualizations. It's all part of the DataTorrent RTS visual tools that we provide with our platform. So with this, let's jump into the demo. So going back to the application we were just looking at and discussing, this telecom demo, if we wanted to visualize data from this app, this app was written specifically so that you could visualize its data. If you can visualize data from this app, and it supports data sources, you will be able to see and create dashboards and visualizations. And you can access them quickly from the application summary view by hitting visualize and going to one of the dashboards that you may have already configured. So let's take a look at one of these dashboards. As you can see, the dashboard is composed of various widgets that are rendering updates in real time. Here you can see for example, the telecom disconnect statistics are changing. So this application was developed with the intent of visualizing telecom provider network operations, and it's taking data from multiple different sources and doing various computations and transformations on them, and then it enables these visualizations. So all the things are related to telecom operations. For example, here's a trend indicator chart, which shows you a number of service calls that are currently happening. This shows you disconnect calls. This one shows you current wait times. This is a bullet chart, which changes depending on whether the current wait times are below or above the certain threshold. You have things like line charts and pie charts, as well as we also support map visualizations. So here you have two examples of geo widgets. One of them is a choropleth visualization, which shows you regions on a map. And as you hover over, you can see the data. So this is California, and you're seeing different zip codes. And if you see one that's in blue, it means that there's at least one or more disconnects. The more intense the color is, the more disconnects there are. And here's equivalent, similar data is being rendered with a bubble chart or a bubble map, which represents the number of wait times with the size of the circle, and it's also plotting them on top of the geomap visualization. So these dashboards, they're flexible. You can they do have a kind of an edit and a view only mode. They support, you can obviously move things around. You can add new widgets. You can delete current widgets. So let's take a look at an example of how you can add some widgets. So to add the widgets, you just say add widget, and this loads a list of available data sources from which the widgets are able to read their data. So the network is a little slow, bear with me. That's one of the risks you take with the live demos. Okay, so here we're looking at the store service key performance indicators data source, which is a data source within that telecom demo app that we looked at earlier. And the available visualizations are line chart, bar chart, stacked area chart, etc. The kind of widgets that are provided are closely related to the kind of data source that it is. We generally support two types of schemas, how data can be delivered from the applications to your widgets, and that is snapshot and dimension schemas. And I'll go into a little bit more detail later. But just to give you an example of what are the widgets available, maybe with a different kind of schema. So see, here you have kind of like a gauge chart or horizontal bar chart, pie chart. Some of them are similar, but the key difference, for example, between this data source and the previous one is this one in a snapshot shows you, it's pretty much like a map of keys and values, and just shows the current state of what data you're trying to visualize, versus the dimensions one, which does set of snapshots over time. So you can see the historical perspective in the other one. So let's say you wanted to add some of these widgets to your dashboard. You can just select one, or you can select multiple, and say Add Widget. And the new widgets will be, so here we've dropped new widgets on this dashboard. Once they connect with their data sources, their data will be loaded. You can also, again, you can resize them, you can reposition them, change their order, etc. So if let's say that you like the changes that you've made, you can just say Save Changes. If you don't want to do that, you can just reload the page, and the changes will be discarded because you did not persist them. Underneath these dashboards and widgets are all stored as JSON objects. And one of the features that I'll also mention is you can take and package these widgets and that comprise dashboards, and export dashboards and add the dashboards to your apps. If you do that, you can then later go into the import functionality under the Visualize section and see some of the dashboards that have been packaged and can be imported. So let's go back into telecom operations. I also wanted to highlight some of the features. So each one of these widgets is fairly full-featured. There are a number of things you can do. For example, let's say that this particular trend indication is showing us disconnected calls. But usually, if the disconnected calls are going out for a telecom provider, that's a bad event. So we probably don't want to have the uptrend be green. It's not like when the stock price is going up. And they're also currently formatted as two decimal places. We might not want to show that. So we can change the format quite easily here, just to remove the extra decimal places, and change the color options. So instead of the upward trend being green, we can just say the upward trend is red and the downward trend is green, because that's when the telecom operator will be happy. And the widget updates, and you should have a new visualization which is showing. So now it's on the downtrend, it's green, and it's showing a whole number. Similar features available for bullet charts, where you can add multiple different stops. And let's say that when you get to the 23-minute wait time, maybe it's orange, and maybe over 25, it should be red. So those kind of options are available as well. And there's a number of other features for these widgets. I don't have a lot of time to cover them all, but yeah, they're fully configurable, including you can even change the visualization style. So instead of California, you can display United States map, and you can change even the colors of the terrain and other things. or circle colors in the visualization. So again, it's going to load in just a second. And so for these widgets, some of them that are supporting dimensional schema, they're not showing the last window, they're showing history. So for those widgets, you can actually go in and look at time ranges. So instead of showing last 10 streaming requests or last 10 intervals, you can increase the number of intervals to 20 and change the interval frequency and save that. Or you can choose to go historical and query them over a range of days. So you can go back in history and show a span over a several days period. So again, this may take a little bit of time to load because I'm on a pretty slow connection. So here's the updated map visualization, and eventually this chart will load. But this gives you a good idea of what the visualizations look like and how you can create widgets and dashboards with DataTorrent RTS. And so what I'd like to do now is pretty quickly go over how you would put this together and expose such visualizations with your own apps. So let's jump into that. So the easiest way to enable visualizations with, so this is purely with Apache Apex. You can just add, you can import the autometric library and add the autometric annotations to your class members. What it will do is every time the STRAM is generating statistics and other information that it exposes via the REST APIs, it will become visible to you and you can pick them up from there. So what you would do is you would then, having created this code and deployed your app and launched it, you can go to Apex CLI. You can connect to the app that you've launched, get its info, and it will tell you what the font's a little small, but it's showing you the app master tracking URL. So that's the address of your STRAM and where you can request services. Question?
Yeah, did you send out on the window boundary?
Yes, every window. Yes. Yeah, and then you can connect. So the step I'm showing below is you can request the STRAM. You can request this information from STRAM via an API request, where you put the tracking URL, and this is an example coming from Physical Plan. And yes, every streaming window you'll get updates, including the various stats that are normally coming out from STRAM if you're requesting them. In addition to that, you will now have a new item listed there called metrics, and inside you will see the variables that you've marked to be autometrics and their corresponding values. This is a physical plan. If you do it, so it shows it at the physical plan level for each individual partition of the operator. It also automatically aggregates it at the logical level. So if you request the logical plan, it will actually be a summary, or it will be an aggregation from the previous level. What you can also do is you can create custom aggregations, and those will enable you to go kind of beyond the basic, integers and like primitive numerics. You can go into strings and other types and create your own aggregations. But now the question is, so your STRAM comes up on a different. The reason we had to find it here is because it's launched on a different container, and that could be on any host and port in your cluster. So how do we get, how do we find it every time? Well, the connection for the visualizations that I was showing is made through the gateway. So the gateway is part of the DataTorrent RTS, which enables, it exposes a whole list of APIs of its own. For those of you who worked with it, you know. But one of the things it does is it publishes, for any applications, that have data sources, and I'll tell you in a second what data source means. It exposes these data sources through a pub-sub connection. And you can subscribe on a topic specific to that data source and start pulling in data. And the data will be coming into your apps and feeding the widgets in your dashboard. So to enable the historical view, so some of the things we saw earlier was data that was historical, but it was application data. You can also visualize in the same way that you visualize your own app data. You can visualize metrics and statistics, and that can be enabled with the app data tracker, which is an application that we wrote. It's a system-level app. It comes packaged with DataTorrent RTS. You can enable it, and what it does is it basically, in this diagram here, we have strands from multiple running apps. The data that's published on the API that I showed a moment ago is feeding into the gateway, and the gateway is then writing it. The application, the app data tracker, is then reading it from the gateway and writing it to HDFS. And then the app data tracker exposes virtual data sources through the gateway, just like the sources that you would write yourself in your app. They're exposed in a very similar way, so it makes it look like your application has additional data sources, which are the metrics for your apps. So you can visualize both your application data and metrics, and also the statistics from the system. So what is a data source? It's basically a combination of a query, source, and result operators put together. When we initially developed it, the query operator, there were basically 3 separate operators separated out. But we realized if the data source operator is getting delayed for some reason, your visualizations wouldn't be very real time. You would actually wait too long to send the request that you'd want to visualize something. So we now recommend this situation where you embed the query operator within the data source, but the result can still be downstream because it will be putting out results every streaming window. And the data sources, again, are the gateway discovers what is a data source based on certain classes that you've built these operators from, and they're exposed through they're listed in the application's response. They're listed as individual data sources. The widgets connect to those. When we were selecting different widgets to visualize, we were selecting from data sources, and as a result, you get this kind of widget that's showing you. So this is horizontal bar chart, which is showing you Twitter top 10. So this is using the snapshot schema that I mentioned earlier. And here I have a brief visualization of how these widgets figure out, first of all, what kind of widgets will be compatible with the data source, and then how do I load my data and render it. And the communication protocol I've detailed on the subsequent slides. I think I'll skip over those slides for the sake of time and to leave a little bit of room for questions. But it's basically you first request the schema from your data source, and then you understand whether it's a snapshot dimensions or you can conceivably write your own schema types if you're doing custom development. And then it will request, once it knows what kind of source it is, the visualizations will show you compatible widgets. And then when the widgets are added, each widget itself requests the data directly, and the data keeps streaming back through the WebSocket, exposed by the gateway as pub/sub, and it automatically times out after 30 requests. But the widgets themselves keep renewing they keep saying, okay, I want to see more data after a certain amount of time. So if you that way, if you close your browser, connection breaks, something else, you're not continually putting load on your the response operators and the query operators. The visualizations are only active when you actually need them. So these are the slides which will be available for download, where you can see how the schema and the data query protocols work, and how you can build your own snapshot schema app by adding, again, this code will give you an insight, if you look at the slides offline, how to put this app together, and how to do the same with dimensions, which is basically the same as schema, but exposes values over history. Yeah. And finally, if you want to export the dashboards, you can just download them here. You can just say download. It downloads a dashboard which is in JSON format. Then you add the dashboard to your source project. So this is your Apex app sources. Under SRC main resources UI dashboards, you just place the files right there. You created a small descriptor file which tells the UI, hey, I have these dashboards and you can attach them to my apps. And when you launch, and then you compile your Apex and you launch it. So whenever you launch your apps and the apps are running and there are packaged dashboards that are available, the visualize button will actually show that you have packaged dashboards, and then you can click on them and connect directly to your widgets. So that's all I had. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Yes?
Made any changes to query operator? And basically, the part where you needed 3 different pieces in order to get visualization components out to the DAG. Is that process as it was, or is it simpler now?
The optimization of combining query inside the data source?
Yeah, or basically just like, I remember when we were adding the visualization components in the past, it basically required adding code in like 3 different places almost. Like there are multiple.
Yes, it's still, so for completely custom data sources, it's still required. We've collapsed the query. Well, it becomes part of the data source. There's still a separate result operator. You actually can bypass all of that because we've developed a class you can just add to your DAG, which is a snapshot server, for example. You can just connect simple maps to the server, and it will take care of the rest of the protocol. So you don't have to worry about it. So we've made that part easy. That's, again, for custom data that you're trying to expose. But if you just want to do metrics from your apps, or like simple counters like I was showing with app metrics,
right.
You don't need to do that at all. That is currently enabled through the app data tracker, but that really is there for if you want to do history. What we're doing now is we're working, and it probably will be in the latest release, a feature where the gateway will handle basically the query and result parts, so you don't have to add it to your code, and it will be automatically sent from your app for the metrics.
Cool. Thank you.